Welcome back to Night Mode Lore. Tonight, we're drifting slowly through the complete story of William Afton, the man who became the monster, the father who became the killer, the engineer who became the murderer, the businessman who became the nightmare, his story being the darkest thread running through Five Nights at Freddy's, being the tale of how normal man became child murderer, how partner became betrayer, how creator became destroyer, how human became something worse than animatronic, something more horrifying than possessed machine, being pure evil, being deliberate cruelty, being William Afton who murdered children, who destroyed families, who corrupted his own creations, who refused to die, who persisted across decades, across deaths, across fires and traps and attempts to end him. William Afton being the ultimate villain, being the source of FNAF's horror, being the one whose crimes created the haunting, whose murders filled animatronics with spirits, whose actions destroyed Henry Emily's dream, whose cruelty defined the franchise, being Purple Guy, being Springtrap, being Scraptrap, being Glitchtrap, being Burntrap, being man who wouldn't stay dead, who refused to accept consequences, who persisted in evil across 40 years, across multiple forms, across death itself. William Afton being villain who defines FNAF, whose story explains everything, whose crimes created the nightmare, whose persistence maintained the horror, being the one we must understand to understand FNAF, being the murderer whose story we explore tonight. This is a complete exploration of William Afton's life and crimes, from his beginning as Henry Emily's partner, through his descent into murder, through his transformation into Springtrap, through his multiple deaths and resurrections, through his digital form, through his modern persistence, examining not just what he did, but why, not just the crimes, but the motivations, not just the murders, but the man who committed them, understanding William Afton as character, as villain, as father who failed, as partner who betrayed, as creator who corrupted, as man who chose evil, who pursued immortality, who sacrificed everything for goals that remained unclear, ambiguous, debated. William being complex villain, being more than simple monster, being man whose motivations we must interpret, whose psychology we must analyze, whose choices we must understand even if we can never condone them, being William Afton, being Purple Guy, being child murderer, being the one who started everything, whose first crime was murdering Henry's daughter, whose continued crimes filled 5 animatronics with murdered children's spirits, whose final crimes involved his own children, his own family, destroying them in pursuit of whatever he sought, immortality or knowledge or resurrection or simply power. William's goals being unclear, but his methods being definite. Murder, deception, corruption, persistence, being villain who defines FNAF, whose complete story we explore tonight. Whether you're discovering William Afton's full story for the first time, revisiting familiar villainy as you drift toward sleep, or simply letting the exploration wash over you as consciousness fades, this will carry you through his complete timeline. Every crime, every transformation, every death, every resurrection, every form he took, every evil he committed, being comprehensive examination designed to give you complete understanding while gently facilitating rest, being story told calmly despite its darkness, being analysis delivered soothingly despite its horror, being Night Mode Lore's approach, comprehensive coverage in sleep-facilitating format. respecting both the content and the purpose, treating FNAF's lore seriously while acknowledging you're here to rest, to sleep, to find calm in detailed storytelling, in complete examination, in thorough analysis that engages mind just enough to quiet anxious thoughts, but not so much that sleep becomes impossible, being exactly what you need, being William Afton's complete story, being Purple Guy's full timeline, being Springtrap's origins, being villain's journey from man to monster to something worse, told gently, told completely, told for sleep. Let's begin this journey through William Afton's story, understanding that we start not with monster but with man, not with murderer but with partner, not with villain but with person who made choices, who descended gradually, who became what he became through decisions, through actions, through crimes that escalated, through evil that deepened. William Afton not being born monster, but becoming one, being person who chose, who acted, who murdered, who persisted, being villain created through choices, being monster made through actions, being Purple Guy formed through crimes, being Springtrap created through springlock failure, being Scraptrap maintained through refusal to die, being Glitchtrap resurrected through digital means, being Burntrap persisting through sheer determination, being William Afton, being the villain, being the murderer, being the monster, being the one whose story explains FNAF's horror, whose crimes created the haunting, whose evil defined the franchise, being story that matters, being villain who shaped everything, being William Afton, being explored completely, being understood thoroughly, being examined comprehensively, beginning now, beginning with the man before the monster, with partner before betrayer, with engineer before killer, with William Afton before he became Purple Guy, before he murdered children, before he destroyed everything, beginning with who he was, understanding what he became, examining why it happened, being complete story, being told now, being William Afton from beginning to end. Part 1. Before the Murders, The Man Before the Monster, 1960s-1983. As we begin this exploration, as sleep starts to pull you deeper, let us travel back before the crimes, before the murders, before William Afton became the villain we know, examining who he was before, what his life looked like, what his partnerships and family were, understanding the man before understanding the monster. William Afton, in the 1960s and 1970s, being engineer, being roboticist, being creator of animatronics alongside Henry Emily, being business partner, being co-founder of Fredbear's Family Diner, being husband, being father to 3 children, being seemingly normal man living seemingly normal life, working on entertainment robotics, building business with friend, raising family. Nothing about his early life obviously predicting what he would become. No clear signs of the monster forming. William appearing normal, appearing successful, appearing to be good partner, good businessman, perhaps not good father but functioning father. Person who existed in society, who held a position, who seemed acceptable, who hid whatever darkness was inside him, who maintained facade of normalcy while perhaps planning crimes, perhaps developing obsessions, perhaps becoming what he would become gradually, secretly, hidden from those around him. William, before the murders being person, we must understand to comprehend how he became murderer, examining his life, his partnerships, his family, his work, his character before crimes revealed his true nature. The partnership with Henry Emily, 2 creators, different motivations. William Afton and Henry Emily partnered to create Fredbear's Family Diner in 1973. Two men with engineering talent, with interest in robotics, with vision for animatronic entertainment, coming together to build business, to create restaurant featuring mechanical performers. Being partnership that seemed productive, seemed beneficial. Two engineers combining skills, Henry being creative genius, being the one who designed animatronics with genuine artistry, with desire to bring joy to children, with pure motivations, wanting to create entertainment that delighted, that made children happy. Henry's purpose being genuine, being wholesome, being exactly what it appeared to be, while William's motivations being more complex, more ambiguous, more difficult to understand. William being skilled engineer, but his reasons for pursuing animatronic entertainment being unclear, being questionable, possibly being less about bringing joy and more about access, about opportunity, about creating infrastructure that could be exploited, about building restaurants where children gathered, where he would have access to them, where he could eventually commit crimes. William's participation in partnership possibly being corrupted from beginning, being motivated by purposes Henry didn't understand, didn't suspect, didn't recognize until too late, until after Charlotte died, until after William's true nature was revealed. The partnership creating Fredbear's Family Diner, featuring Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, both being Springlock suits designed by Henry and William together, the technology being innovative, being hybrid system allowing suits to function as both animatronics and costumes. The Springlock mechanism being dangerous but useful, allowing flexibility, allowing performers to wear suits. William being particularly associated with Spring Bonnie, being the one who wore it often, who performed in it, who understood its mechanisms, who would later use it for darkest purpose, using Spring Bonnie costume to gain children's trust, to lure them to back rooms, to murder them. The suit that was meant to bring joy being corrupted into murder weapon, being tool for gaining trust that would be betrayed. William's association with Spring Bonnie being innocent initially, being just partner wearing costume, performing for children, entertaining them, but becoming sinister in retrospect. Understanding that William wore Spring Bonnie, that children learned to trust Spring Bonnie, that this trust would be weaponized, would be used to lure victims, would be exploited for murder. William's role in partnership being corrupted, being twisted, being dark beneath surface that seemed normal, seemed acceptable, seemed like a simple business partnership between two engineers creating entertainment, but being more complex, being darker, being William Afton hiding true nature, hiding real motivations, hiding whatever drove him toward crimes he would commit. The Afton family, father to 3 children. William Afton was married, had 3 children, his family being important for understanding him, for comprehending his later actions, for analyzing his motivations. William being father to crying child, name unclear, possibly Evan or Chris, to Michael Afton, to Elizabeth Afton. 3 children who would all suffer because of him, who would all die directly or indirectly because of William's actions. William's family being destroyed by him, by his crimes, by his obsessions, by his choices. Being father who failed catastrophically, who harmed his own children, who destroyed his family through his actions. William's relationship with his children being complex, being evidence of his character, being insight into who he was before becoming monster. William being neglectful father at minimum, being frightening father possibly, being father who scared crying child, who allowed Michael to bully younger brother, who created Elizabeth, who became so desperate for father's attention that she approached animatronic he told her to avoid. William's parenting being poor, being harmful, being destructive even before his crimes. William failing as father, failing to protect his children, failing to be present for them, failing to create safe family environment. His neglect and absence creating conditions where crying child was bullied, where Elizabeth was ignored, where Michael became cruel. William's family suffering because of him, because of his choices, because of his priorities that valued work over children, valued experiments over family, valued whatever he valued over being good father, being present father, being protective father. The family dynamics being dysfunctional, being evidence that William was problematic before becoming murderer, that he was failing as human before he became monster. Crying child being terrified child, having nightmares about animatronics, being afraid of restaurant, being scared of father's creations, possibly being scared of father himself. The fear being pathological, being extreme, being evidence of trauma, of environment that wasn't safe, wasn't healthy, wasn't appropriate for child, crying child's terror being William's responsibility, being father's failure, being evidence of poor parenting at minimum, of frightening parenting possibly, of abuse potentially. Crying child being so scared that he cried constantly, that he couldn't function at restaurant, that he begged not to go to parties, that he was traumatized child in dysfunctional family. William being responsible for this, being father who should have protected him, should have helped him, should have addressed his fear, but instead dismissing it, ignoring it, allowing it to continue, allowing crying child to suffer, being neglectful father, being harmful father, being father who failed his son, who would fail him ultimately, catastrophically, when crying child died in Bite of 83. Died because older brother and friends bullied him, picked him up, shoved his head in Fredbear's mouth as cruel prank, springlock jaw activating, crushing his skull, killing him, William's youngest son dying at his restaurant, killed by his animatronic because William failed to protect him, failed to prevent Michael's bullying, failed to supervise children, failed to design safe animatronics, failed as father completely. Crying child's death being William's failure, being moment that might have broken him, might have changed him, might have started his descent into murder, being tragedy that could explain his later crimes, though never excusing them. Engineering, brilliance, and dangerous innovation. William Afton was brilliant engineer, being skilled roboticist, being creator of sophisticated animatronics, being innovator in mechanical entertainment, his technical skills being genuine, being remarkable, being evidence that William was talented, was intelligent, was capable of great things. His engineering being crucial to understanding him, being what he was good at, being what he valued, possibly being what he loved more than family, more than ethics, more than human concerns. William's brilliance being focused on animatronics, on robotics, on creating mechanical life. His skill being evident in spring-lock suits, in animatronic designs, in innovations that made Fredbear's and Freddy Fazbear's pizza possible. William being crucial technical partner, being the one who could implement Henry's visions, who could solve mechanical problems, who could create functioning animatronics from designs, who could innovate, who could push boundaries, William's engineering being both gift and curse, being talent that created entertainment and enabled murder, being skill that built restaurants and created weapons, being brilliance that served good purposes and evil purposes. William using his engineering for crimes, for creating animatronics that could capture children, for designing systems that concealed bodies, for building technology that served his dark purposes, his brilliance being corrupted, being twisted, being used for evil, William being example of talented person using gifts for harm, being brilliant mind applied to terrible purposes, being engineer who became murderer, who used technical skills for crimes, who corrupted his own creations. The spring lock suits being particular example of William's dangerous innovation, being his design possibly, being technology that was brilliant and deadly, allowing suits to function as both animatronics and costumes, the mechanism being triggered by moisture or sudden movement, causing springs to snap back, causing mechanical parts to clamp down on anyone wearing suit, crushing them, killing them violently, the spring lock suits being inherently dangerous, being design that prioritized functionality over safety, being William's approach embodied, being brilliance without ethics, being innovation without concern for human cost, the spring lock suits eventually being restricted after incidents, after people died wearing them, the technology being too dangerous. But William continuing to use Spring Bonnie, continuing to wear it, continuing to rely on it, eventually dying in it, being killed by his own creation, by springlock failure that crushed him, that left him trapped in suit, that transformed him into Springtrap, William being destroyed by his own innovation, being killed by his own engineering, being victim of his own dangerous design, the irony being poetic, being appropriate, being William experiencing consequences of his own disregard for safety, his own prioritization of functionality over protection, his own willingness to create dangerous things, dying because of this, being killed by Spring Bonnie, by Springlock suit, by his own creation, being engineer destroyed by his engineering, being creator killed by his creation. The Man Before the Monster, Character Analysis. Understanding William before the murders requires examining what we know, what we can infer, what evidence suggests about his character, his psychology, his nature before crimes revealed him completely. William appearing to be intelligent, talented, ambitious, driven, but also being neglectful, being cold, being distant, being father who failed his children, being partner who would betray Henry, being person who hid true nature, who maintained facade, who seemed normal while perhaps planning crimes, perhaps developing obsessions, perhaps becoming murderer gradually. William before crimes being ambiguous, being difficult to understand because evidence is limited, because he hid himself, because he presented false face to world, being person who concealed whatever darkness was inside him, who functioned in society while being corrupt beneath the surface, being example of how evil can hide, how monsters can appear normal, how murderers can seem acceptable until their crimes are discovered. William being this, being hidden evil, being concealed monster, being person who seemed like engineer, partner, father, but who was becoming or already was murderer, predator, monster, his true nature being hidden, being secret, being known only to him until he acted, until he killed, until crimes revealed what he really was. Whether William was always monster or became monster is debated, being questioned about his nature, about when evil began, whether he was born with darkness or developed it, whether crying child's death created murderer or revealed murderer who already existed, the timeline being unclear, the causation being ambiguous. William's first murder being Charlotte Emily, killed sometime between 1983 and 1985. Whether this was first killing or whether he killed before being unknown. Whether crying child's death motivated Charlotte's murder or whether William was already killer being interpretable. The evidence supporting multiple readings. William being complex villain whose psychology we must interpret, whose motivations we must theorize, whose nature we must analyze, being man who became monster, being person who chose evil, being William Afton before he became Purple Guy, before he murdered children, before he destroyed everything, being man we examine now, being person we try to understand, being character we analyze before exploring crimes, before detailing murders, before following his descent into complete evil, being foundation for understanding villain, being context for comprehending monster, being man before we see monster, being William Afton in early years, being partner, father, engineer, person who would become child murderer, who would destroy families, who would corrupt everything, being explored now, being understood, being examined as preparation for understanding crimes, for comprehending descent, for following journey from man to monster to something worse, being William Afton before becoming Purple Guy, being foundation, being context, being preparation for horror that comes next. Let this foundation rest. As this section concludes, as sleep deepens around you, let William Afton's early life settle into understanding, knowing he was partner to Henry Emily, father to 3 children, engineer creating animatronics, person who seemed normal but was hiding true nature, being man before monster, being person before crimes revealed him, understanding this being necessary for comprehending what follows. William's partnership with Henry being productive but corrupted, his family being dysfunctional and tragic, his engineering being brilliant but dangerous, his character being ambiguous and hidden, being person who would become murderer, who would kill children, who would destroy Henry's daughter, who would fill animatronics with spirits, who would refuse to die, who would persist across decades, but starting here, starting as engineer, as partner, as father, as person who made choices, who descended, who became evil, being William Afton before Purple Guy, being man before monster, being foundation for understanding villain, being context settled now, being ready to continue, to explore his crimes, to examine his murders, to understand his descent, being prepared now, being foundation laid, being able to rest with this understanding, to sleep knowing context, to drift toward dreams while comprehending that William started as person, as man, as engineer, before becoming what he became, being monster created through choices, being villain formed through actions, being murderer developed through crimes, starting here, starting with man, with partner, with father, with William Afton before everything, being understood now, being foundation complete, being ready to continue after rest. Part 2. The Descent, Tragedy and First Crimes, 1983-1985. As we continue deeper into William's story, as consciousness drifts further toward rest, we must examine the descent, the period when William Afton became murderer, when man became monster, when engineer became killer. The years between 1983 and 1985 being crucial, being when everything changed, when William committed first crimes, when he murdered Charlotte Emily, when he killed 5 more children, when he became Purple Guy, when he filled animatronics with murdered children's spirits, when he destroyed Henry's daughter, when he created the haunting that would define FNAF, this period being William's transformation, being his descent into evil, being when he became villain we know, examining what happened, examining why it happened, examining the crying child's death in 1983, and whether it motivated William's crimes, examining Charlotte's murder as first victim, examining missing children incident in 1985 as escalation, examining William's methods, his choices, his psychology, understanding how man became murderer, how father became child killer, how William Afton descended into complete evil, being explored now, being examined comprehensively, being understood as turning point, as transformation, as descent from person into monster, from man into murderer, from William into Purple Guy, being period that defines him, that creates villain, that establishes horror, being examined now completely. The crying child's death, catalyst or coincidence, 1983. The bite of 83 killed William's youngest son, the crying child dying when Michael and his friends shoved child's head into Fredbear's mouth as prank, springlock jaw activating, crushing skull, killing child, being tragedy, being death of William's son, being loss that could have broken him, that might have changed him, that potentially motivated his subsequent crimes, the theory being that crying child's death created murderer, that grief corrupted William, that loss transformed him into killer, that his crimes were motivated by desperation to understand death, to reverse it, to bring son back, to achieve impossible resurrection. William becoming murderer because he lost son, because he couldn't accept death, because he pursued forbidden knowledge, remnant research, possession mechanics, trying to understand how spirits bind to animatronics, trying to learn what he needed to restore his son, murdering other children as experiments, as research subjects, as means to understand possession so he could apply knowledge to his own child, the theory being sympathetic, being tragedy-driven, being William as broken father rather than pure monster, his crimes being motivated by love corrupted into madness, by grief transformed into cruelty, by desperation that justified any means, William becoming villain because he lost son, because loss destroyed his morality, because tragedy broke whatever restraints kept him human. But alternative interpretation exists, being that crying child's death was coincidence, being that William was already planning crimes, was already becoming killer, that he would have murdered children regardless of his son's death, that the tragedy didn't create murderer, but perhaps revealed murderer who already existed, perhaps accelerated timeline but didn't change destination, William being person who would have committed crimes anyway, who was corrupt before loss, who was evil independent of tragedy, the evidence being ambiguous, being interpretable either way. Charlotte dying sometime after bite of 83 but exact timeline unclear. Being possible William murdered Henry's daughter very soon after losing his own son. Being revenge, being cruelty, being taking from Henry what was taken from him, or being possible Charlotte died first. Being possible William was already murderer before his son died. That crying child's death was consequence rather than cause, was karma rather than motivation. Was William experiencing tragedy because he was evil person rather than becoming evil person? Because he experienced tragedy, the chronology being unclear, being debated, being subject of theories, William's motivations being ambiguous, being unknowable, being something we must interpret based on limited evidence, on scattered clues, on reading between lines of games that never explicitly explain why William did what he did, why he murdered children, why he became monster, leaving us to theorize, to interpret, to construct psychological profiles from minimal information. Charlotte Emily's murder, the first victim, 1983 to 1984. Charlotte Emily was William's first victim, or first victim we know about. Henry's daughter being murdered by his partner. Little girl being killed outside her father's restaurant while party continued inside. Charlotte being left outside, being alone, being vulnerable. William approaching her, killing her. The murder being deliberate, being targeted possibly. Being Henry's daughter specifically, William choosing to kill his partner's child, to destroy Henry's family, to take Charlotte's life, the motivations being unclear, being debated, possibly being revenge if crying child died first, William taking from Henry what he lost, destroying partner's family because his own family was destroyed, being cruel symmetry, being deliberate targeting, or possibly being opportunistic, being Charlotte being vulnerable and William acting on impulse, on desire, on whatever motivated him to kill children. Charlotte being target of convenience rather than target of revenge, or possibly being first experiment, being William beginning research into death and possession, killing Charlotte to observe what happened, to study possession mechanics, to start learning what he needed to know, his motivations being mixed possibly, being multiple things, being revenge and opportunity and experimentation, being complex rather than simple, being William having multiple reasons rather than single clear motivation, the method being straightforward, being direct killing, being murder without elaborate planning, Charlotte being outside, being alone, William approaching, killing her, leaving body outside, the security puppet finding her too late, Charlotte's spirit binding to the puppet, possessing it, becoming the puppet, being first possession, being proof that murdered children's spirits could bind to animatronics, being discovery that would inform William's later crimes, that would shape his methods, that would influence his research. William learning from Charlotte's death that possession was possible, that spirits bound to machines, that murdered children became haunted animatronics. This knowledge being crucial, being what made missing children incident possible, being what gave William reason to stuff bodies in animatronic suits, not just to hide evidence but to facilitate possession, to create conditions where spirits would bind, where murdered children would possess, where William could study process, could observe mechanics, could learn what he needed to learn, Charlotte's death being first murder and first lesson, being crime and research, being evil and education. William killing Henry's daughter and learning from it, becoming murderer and scientist simultaneously, being person who killed and studied, who destroyed and analyzed, who committed crimes while pursuing understanding, being William Afton as murderer researcher, being purple guy as killer scientist, being villain who murdered for multiple purposes, who killed for reasons beyond simple cruelty, whose crimes served his goals whatever those goals were. Immortality, resurrection, knowledge, power, understanding. William's motivations being complex, being multiple, being ambiguous, being unknowable fully, but being more than simple evil, being more than just wanting to hurt children, being something darker, being something more twisted, being crimes in service of goals, being murders with purposes, being evil with motivations that we must interpret, must theorize, must try to understand even if we can never know certainly. The Missing Children Incident. 5 more deaths. June 26, 1985. On June 26, 1985, William Afton murdered 5 children at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, luring them to back room using Spring Bonnie costume. Children trusting the mascot, following Spring Bonnie, being led to back room where surveillance didn't reach, where William could murder them without witnesses. The children being Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy, though their names weren't always known, their identities being revealed gradually through games and books, the children being murdered, being killed in back room, their bodies being stuffed into animatronic suits, into Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy, the bodies being hidden, being concealed inside animatronics, the suits becoming tombs, becoming hiding places, being perfect concealment, animatronics containing corpses, children's bodies rotting inside mechanical entertainers, creating smell, creating fluid leakage, creating obvious problems that were ignored, that were explained away, that were managed rather than investigated. Fazbear Entertainment, choosing not to open suits, choosing not to examine thoroughly, choosing to continue operating despite knowing something was wrong, despite understanding that animatronics were corrupted, being corporate complicity in William's crimes, being system-enabling murderer, being infrastructure-supporting killer. William's method being sophisticated, being carefully planned, being use of Spring Bonnie costume to gain trust, children being taught that Fazbear Entertainment's characters were friendly, were safe, were trustworthy. This trust being weaponized, being exploited, being used to lure children to their deaths. William wearing Spring Bonnie being betrayal of everything costume represented, being corruption of entertainment character, being use of children's trust against them, being predatory behavior, being calculated evil. William planning this, knowing children would trust Spring Bonnie, using costume deliberately to lure victims, to isolate them, to murder them. The premeditation being clear, being evident, being proof that William was calculating murderer, was deliberate killer, was person who planned crimes, who chose methods, who executed plans, who murdered 5 children in single incident, being mass murder, being crime spree, being escalation from Charlotte's single death to 5 deaths, William becoming serial killer, becoming monster who murdered multiple children, who filled 5 animatronic suits with bodies, who created 5 possessions, who enabled 5 spirits to haunt machines. William's crimes creating the haunted animatronics that define FNAF, creating the possessed machines that attack night guards, creating the supernatural horror that the franchise depicts. William being responsible for all of it, being source of haunting, being origin of possession, being creator of horror through his crimes, through his murders, through his evil. Methods and psychology. Understanding the killer. William's methods revealing his psychology, his careful planning indicating intelligence, calculation, patience. William being smart murderer, being careful killer, being person who planned crimes to avoid detection, who chose methods to facilitate concealment, who used costume to gain trust, who selected location without surveillance, who stuffed bodies in animatronic suits both to hide evidence and to study possession. William being methodical, being systematic, being organized killer rather than disorganized killer, being person who planned rather than acted impulsively, who calculated rather than following passion, his murders being cold, being deliberate, being executed according to plan. William being frightening not because he was chaotic, but because he was controlled. Not because he was impulsive, but because he was calculated. Not because he was mad, but because he was methodical. Being villain who planned, who executed, who succeeded in crimes, who avoided capture for years, who continued murdering despite investigations, despite suspicion, despite everything. William being successful killer, being murderer who achieved his goals, who murdered children and avoided consequences, who filled animatronics with spirits and studied results, who pursued his research through crimes, who learned what he wanted to learn, who achieved what he wanted to achieve, being frightening because he succeeded, because he got away with it for so long, because his crimes worked according to his plans, the psychology being complex, being unknowable fully, William's internal state being something we must infer, must theorize, must construct from external evidence, from his actions, from his choices, from his methods. The psychology being either grief-driven, if we accept that crying child's death motivated crimes, William being broken father, pursuing impossible resurrection, studying possession to understand how to restore his son, murdering other children as experiments, as research subjects, as means to understand mechanics that might allow him to bring back what he lost. His psychology being tragic, being sympathetic origin that doesn't excuse crimes but explains them, makes them comprehensible as grief corrupted into madness, as love transformed into evil, as father who lost son becoming monster who murdered other people's children, or psychology being purely evil if we reject grief motivation, if we understand William as person who was already corrupt, who was already becoming killer, who murdered because he wanted to, because he sought power or immortality, or simply enjoyed killing. Being psychopath, being person without empathy, without conscience, without moral constraints, being pure evil, being monster in human form, being person who chose evil deliberately, who murdered children because he wanted to, because it served his purposes, because he was corrupt, was evil, was monster. The psychology being either tragic or purely evil, being either understandable or incomprehensible, being either motivated by grief or motivated by darkness, being interpretable, being ambiguous, being something each theorist must decide, must interpret, must understand according to evidence and analysis and personal reading of William's character. Aftermath and continuation. Getting away with murder. William Afton was never prosecuted for the missing children incident, was never charged, was never arrested despite being suspect, despite having opportunity and means and possible motive, despite evidence pointing toward him. William avoiding consequences, avoiding justice, avoiding accountability, being protected possibly by Fazbear Entertainment, being shielded by corporate desire to avoid scandal, to protect business, to maintain operations, the corporation choosing to settle lawsuits, to pay families, to suppress investigation rather than pursuing truth, rather than seeking justice, rather than holding William accountable, being corporate complicity, being system-protecting murderer, being infrastructure-enabling killer to continue. William remaining free, remaining employed, possibly, remaining able to access children, remaining dangerous, remaining threat, being murderer who got away with it, who avoided consequences, who continued existing in society, despite being child killer, despite being monster, being example of how predators can avoid justice, how systems can fail victims, how corporations can enable evil through prioritizing profit over accountability, over truth, over justice. Fazbear Entertainment being as guilty as William in some ways, being enablers, being accomplices after the fact, being corporate entity that protected murderer, that allowed him to remain free, that chose business over justice, being evil of different kind, being systematic evil, being corporate evil that enabled individual evil, being infrastructure that supported monster, that protected killer, that allowed William Afton to continue, to persist, to remain in world despite his crimes, despite his murders, despite being person who killed 6 children at minimum, Charlotte and the 5, being serial killer who remained free, being monster who avoided consequences, being William Afton after crimes, being purple guy established, being murderer successful, being villain continuing, being evil persisting, being examined next, being his transformation into Springtrap, being his death that wasn't death, being his persistence beyond human life, being William Afton's refusal to die, being explored after rest. Let this descent rest. As this section concludes, as sleep deepens further, let William's descent into murder settle over you, understanding that he transformed from man to monster during this period, that he murdered Charlotte Emily, that he killed 5 more children, that he became Purple Guy, that he filled animatronics with spirits, that he created FNAF's horror, that his crimes were beginning rather than end, that he would continue, that he would persist, that he would refuse to die, being villain established now, being murderer revealed, being monster confirmed, William Afton descending from partner and father into child killer, into serial murderer, into person who destroyed families, who corrupted animatronics, who created haunting, being his descent, being his transformation, being period when he became villain, being explored now, being understood, being ready to continue, to examine his death, to understand his transformation into Springtrap, to follow his persistence across deaths and fires and decades, being William Afton's story continuing, being Purple Guy's journey from murderer to corpse in suit, to Springtrap, to Scraptrap, to digital form, to burn trap, being persistence explored next, being refusal to die examined, being villain who wouldn't stop, being monster who continued across decades, being William Afton's complete story, being told comprehensively, being explored thoroughly, being ready now to continue after rest. Part 3. Springlock Failure, Becoming Springtrap, 1993. As we move deeper still, as most consciousness fades toward dreams, we examine William Afton's death, his transformation, his becoming something worse than human, the Springlock failure being pivotal moment, being when William died and didn't die, when he became Springtrap, when murderer became corpse in suit, when human evil became mechanical horror, the failure happening in 1993 at abandoned Freddy Fazbear's pizza location. William returning there for reasons unclear, possibly being lured by spirits, possibly seeking equipment, possibly hiding from something. William entering safe room, secret room hidden from animatronics, Room not visible on digital maps. Room where Springlock suits were stored. Room where he had murdered children years earlier. William entering this room, being cornered there by spirits of murdered children, by possessed animatronics, by ghosts of his victims. Gabriel and Jeremy and Susie and Fritz and Cassidy confronting him, approaching him, terrifying him. William panicking, seeing Spring Bonnie suit, climbing into it, thinking it would protect him, thinking animatronics wouldn't recognize him in costume, thinking he could hide, could escape, could survive. William putting on Spring Bonnie suit in panic, in fear, making fatal mistake, the safe room, being humid, being decayed, conditions being wrong. William sweating, breathing heavily, moisture triggering spring locks, sudden movements activating mechanism, the spring locks failing, snapping back, mechanical parts clamping down, crushing William, impaling him, killing him slowly, violently, terribly. William experiencing the danger he created, dying because of his own engineering, being killed by Spring Bonnie, by costume he wore to murder children, by suit he used to gain trust, being killed by his own creation, the irony being complete, being poetic, being appropriate, William dying as he deserved, being crushed, being destroyed, being murdered by machine he created, experiencing violent death, suffering as he made others suffer, being killed, being dead, but not being finished, not being done. William's story not ending with death, being just beginning. The Springlock failure. Mechanical death. The Springlock failure was catastrophic, being complete system failure, all spring locks failing simultaneously. The mechanical parts that were held back by springs being released, snapping into place with tremendous force. The suit's internal mechanisms being designed to fold animatronic parts when suit was worn. The spring locks holding parts back, keeping internal mechanisms compressed, allowing space for human body. The failure releasing everything, allowing all mechanical parts to snap back into their normal positions. Positions that included space now occupied by William's body. The mechanical parts tearing through flesh, crushing bones, impaling organs. The suit's endoskeleton forcing itself into space where William was. The metal beams and rods and mechanical components piercing through him, entering his body in dozens of places. The spring locks in mask crushing his skull. The jaw mechanism breaking his jaw. The eyes pieces destroying his eyes. Every part of the suit having spring locks, every section failing. William being crushed from all directions simultaneously, experiencing unimaginable pain, suffering beyond description. The death being slow, being prolonged. William remaining conscious briefly, long enough to understand what was happening, long enough to realize he was dying, long enough to laugh. The minigame showing him laughing as he died. William finding humor in his death, finding amusement in irony, finding something funny about being killed by his own creation, his final moments being bizarre, being disturbing, being evidence of his twisted psychology, being proof that William was monster even in death, laughing as Springlocks killed him, laughing as he was crushed, laughing as he died. But death not being end, William not dying completely, his body dying but something persisting, his consciousness remaining, his awareness continuing. William becoming trapped in Spring Bonnie suit, his corpse being contained in costume, his remains being sealed inside animatronic, the suit becoming his body, the costume becoming his prison. William being Spring Bonnie now, being corpse in suit, being dead but aware. Being human remains in mechanical shell. Being Springtrap forming. Being transformation from William Afton into something else, into hybrid of corpse and costume, into fusion of human remains and animatronic suit. William persisting beyond death, continuing despite being killed, remaining aware despite being dead, his consciousness binding to suit somehow, through remnant possibly, through sheer determination possibly, through refusal to die possibly. William remaining, continuing, persisting, becoming Springtrap, the safe room being sealed afterward, being walled up, being hidden. William being trapped inside, being sealed in darkness, being left in abandoned room for 30 years, experiencing decades of imprisonment, of isolation, of being corpse in suit and sealed room. William enduring this, persisting through this, continuing through this, being Springtrap, being trapped, being imprisoned, being dead but aware, being human remains with consciousness, being horror embodied, being what William became, being his first transformation, being his first death, being beginning of his persistence, being Springtrap, being examined now completely. 30 years sealed, imprisonment and decay, 1993–1923. William spent 30 years sealed in safe room, trapped in Spring Bonnie suit, existing as Springtrap, experiencing decades of isolation, of darkness, of imprisonment, his body decaying, rotting, decomposing inside suit, the organic matter breaking down while consciousness persisted. William experiencing his own decay, being aware as flesh rotted, as bones remained, as he became skeleton in costume, being conscious through decades of decomposition, of physical deterioration, of becoming less human and more mechanical, the suit preserving him somehow, holding remains together, preventing complete dissolution. William existing in state between life and death, being neither alive nor fully dead, being corpse with consciousness, being remains with awareness, being something that shouldn't exist but did, being horror, being wrong, being violation of natural order. Dead should be dead. Consciousness should end. William should have been gone, but wasn't. Persisting through sheer refusal to die, through determination to continue, through whatever kept him bound to world, to suit, to existence. William experiencing 30 years of this, 30 years sealed in darkness, 30 years alone with thoughts, 30 years as corpse in costume, the psychological impact being immense, being beyond comprehension, being isolation and decay and awareness all combined, being nightmare existence, being horror of being dead but aware, being trapped but conscious, being rotting but persisting. The isolation being complete, being absolute, William being sealed in room with no exit, no light, no stimulation except his own thoughts, his own awareness of condition, his own understanding of what he became, 30 years to think about crimes, about murders, about everything he did, though whether William felt remorse being unlikely, being doubtful, being inconsistent with his character. William more likely spending decades planning, scheming, waiting, determined to escape, to continue, to pursue his goals whatever they were. The imprisonment not reforming him, not changing him, not making him better but making him more determined, more corrupted, more evil, 30 years sealed away concentrating his malice, fermenting his evil, making him worse rather than better. William emerging from imprisonment being more dangerous than when he entered, being Springtrap fully formed, being villain refined by decades of isolation, being monster perfected by suffering, being evil purified by imprisonment. William becoming more himself, more purely villainous, more completely evil through 30 years of isolation, emerging not reformed but reinforced, not changed but confirmed, not softened but hardened, being Springtrap, being Purple Guy in new form, being William Afton concentrated into pure malice in corpse costume, being what 30 years sealed away created, being examined next, being his emergence, being his actions as Springtrap, being his role in FNAF 3, being his first death survived, being explored after rest, being continued soon, being William Afton as Springtrap, being corpse in suit, being dead but persisting, being monster transformed, being villain evolved, being examined comprehensively, being understood completely, being ready to continue after rest, after letting this settle, after understanding transformation, after comprehending that William died and didn't die, that he became Springtrap, that he persisted for 30 years sealed away, that he would emerge, would continue, would refuse to stay dead, being William Afton's first death, being beginning of his persistence, being established now, being understood, being ready to continue. Let this transformation rest. As this section concludes, understanding that William died in Springlock failure, that he was crushed by Spring Bonnie suit, that he laughed as he died, that he became Springtrap, that he was sealed in safe room for 30 years, that he persisted through decades of imprisonment, that he remained aware as corpse in suit, that he decayed and continued, that he became something worse than human, being transformation complete, being William Afton becoming Springtrap, being man becoming corpse in costume, being murderer becoming mechanical horror, being villain transformed, being monster evolved, being examined now, being understood, being ready to continue, to explore his emergence, to understand his actions as Springtrap, to follow his continued persistence, being William's story continuing, being Purple Guy's evolution continuing, being Springtrap examined next, being first death survived, being 30 years sealed away completed, being emergence coming, being FNAF 3 events explored, being Fazbear's Fright horror attraction, being William's continued villainy, being his refusal to stop even as corpse in suit, being his persistence explored, being his evil continued, being examined after rest, being ready soon to continue, to understand Springtrap, to comprehend William's continued evil, to follow his journey further, being story continuing, being villain persisting, being monster refusing to die, being William Afton, being Springtrap, being Purple Guy in new form, being examined comprehensively, being understood deeply, being ready to rest now, to sleep with understanding, to drift, knowing transformation is complete, knowing William became Springtrap, knowing murderer became mechanical horror, knowing villain persisted, being able to rest with this knowledge, to sleep with this understanding, being ready now to continue after rest. Part 4. Springtrap Era, Return and Continued Evil, 2023. Continuing now through William's story, understanding that Springtrap emerged after 30 years sealed away, that he was discovered by crew setting up Fazbear's Fright horror attraction, that horror entrepreneurs found the safe room, found Springtrap inside, brought him to their attraction thinking he was deactivated animatronic, not knowing he was William Afton's corpse, not realizing he was possessed, was conscious, was dangerous. Springtrap being moved to Fazbear's Fright, being put on display, being central attraction, being real animatronic from original location, being authentic piece of Fazbear entertainment history, though being more than that, being actual William Afton, being corpse of murderer in suit he died in, being purple guy physically present, being villain as exhibit, horror attraction displaying actual horror without knowing it, Springtrap being in Fazbear's Fright during FNAF 3, being active during gameplay, attacking Night Guard, being dangerous, being aggressive, being William continuing his evil, continuing to pursue guards, continuing to hunt, continuing to kill or attempt to kill, William as Springtrap being consistent with William as human, being murderer still, being killer despite being corpse, being evil persisting beyond death, William's consciousness in decayed body and rotting suit continuing to be dangerous, continuing to pursue victims, continuing to be threat. Springtrap era being proof that William wouldn't stop, wouldn't reform, wouldn't change, being dead making him no less evil, being corpse making him no less dangerous, being decades sealed away teaching him nothing except patience. Springtrap being William evolved, being purple guy in final form, being ultimate expression of his evil, being examined now, being understood completely. Fazbear's Fright, horror attraction and irony. Fazbear's Fright horror attraction opened in 2023. 30 years after original restaurants closed, entrepreneurs creating horror attraction based on Freddy Fazbear's pizza history, on rumors of murders, on legends of possessed animatronics, on dark past of Fazbear entertainment, the attraction being commercialization of tragedy, being exploitation of real crimes, being entertainment made from actual murders, actual child deaths, actual horror, the attraction using props and decorations and one real animatronic. Springtrap, genuine artifact from original location, real piece of Fazbear entertainment history, though staff not knowing it contained William Afton's corpse, not knowing it was possessed, not knowing it was dangerous, treating Springtrap as deactivated animatronic, as prop, as decoration, not realizing it was conscious, was aware, was William Afton continuing to exist, continuing to be evil, continuing to be threat. The irony being that horror attraction meant to simulate fear created real fear. Entertainment based on tragedy became site of potential tragedy. Attraction about murders could have become site of murder. Springtrap being real danger in fake horror show, being actual threat in simulated fright, being William Afton present in attraction about William Afton's crimes, being purple guy on display, being villain as entertainment, being monster as exhibit, the irony being profound, being typical of FNAF, being entertainment corrupted by reality, being fiction becoming truth, being simulation containing actual danger. The night guard working at Fazbear's Fright presumably being Michael Afton, being William's son, being person with reason to be there, to be investigating, to be confronting father. Michael's presence at Fazbear's Fright making sense if he's pursuing William, if he's trying to stop father, if he's attempting to end what William started. Michael confronting Springtrap being a son confronting father, being family confrontation, being personal rather than simply job, though this be an interpretation, being theory, night guard's identity never being confirmed explicitly, but Michael being likely, being probable, being person with motivation to be there, to face Springtrap, to survive nights of being hunted by father's corpse in suit, the dynamic being disturbing if guard is Michael, being family horror, being son being hunted by father, being child being pursued by parent, being reversal of protection, being father as threat rather than guardian, being twisted family relationship, being what Afton family became, William hunting Michael, father trying to kill son, being complete perversion of family bonds, being ultimate expression of Afton family dysfunction, being examined in detail, being William as a Springtrap pursuing guard who might be his son, being horror of family turned completely dark. Springtrap's behavior. Corpse as predator. Springtrap's behavior in FNAF 3 being aggressive, being predatory, being William continuing his evil despite being corpse in suit. Springtrap moving through facility, approaching office, entering vents, being unstoppable once active, being threat that persists, being William's consciousness controlling suit, moving corpse, pursuing victims, attempting to kill, being evidence that William remained himself despite death, that he was still dangerous despite being remains, that he was still evil despite being sealed away for 30 years. Springtrap's aggression being William's aggression, being murderer's drive to kill continuing beyond death, beyond body, beyond life. William as Springtrap being proof that he wouldn't stop, wouldn't reform, wouldn't change, being evil that persisted, being malice that endured, being purple guy continuing regardless of death, regardless of imprisonment, regardless of anything. William being determined to continue, to pursue, to hunt, to kill, being villain that wouldn't quit, being monster that wouldn't stop, being horror that wouldn't end. Springtrap representing William's complete evil, his total corruption, his absolute refusal to stop being villain, being purple guy in truest form, being William Afton at most evil, being corpse animated by malice, being remains moved by evil, being suit controlled by murderer's consciousness, being Springtrap, being William, being continued threat, being persistent danger, being evidence that William Afton was evil beyond death, beyond humanity, beyond anything that could stop him except complete destruction, except burning, except ending completely. The phantom animatronics appearing in FNAF 3 being a separate phenomenon possibly, being hallucinations or spiritual manifestations, being connected to William somehow, being influenced by him possibly, being drawn to him possibly, being responses to Springtrap's presence, burned animatronics appearing as phantoms, as echoes, as spiritual phenomena responding to Purple Guy being present, to William Afton being at location, the phantoms not being controlled by William but being connected to him, being part of supernatural landscape he created, being evidence that William's crimes had lasting impact, created lasting contamination, made locations haunted not just by possessed animatronics but by spiritual corruption, by supernatural residue, by horror that persisted beyond physical destruction, being what William created, being legacy of his crimes, being corruption that endured, phantoms being symptoms of this, being evidence of spiritual damage, being proof that William's evil had consequences beyond murdered children, beyond possessed animatronics, beyond obvious effects, creating broader corruption, wider contamination, deeper horror, being William's complete impact, being full scope of his crime's consequences. The first fire. Survival and persistence. Fazbear's Fright burned at end of FNAF 3, fire-destroying facility, burning attraction, presumably destroying Springtrap, fire being hot enough to consume building, to destroy animatronic, to end William. Fire being what should have killed him finally, permanently, ending his persistence, ending his evil, ending Springtrap. ending William Afton, but he survived. He persisted. He endured. Springtrap surviving the fire. William continuing beyond burning, persisting beyond destruction, refusing to die, refusing to end, crawling from burning building, existing as burned corpse in burned suit, being Springtrap still, being William still, being alive somehow, being conscious somehow, persisting somehow, refusing to die, refusing to stop, refusing to end. The survival being evidence of his determination, of his refusal to accept death, of his persistence beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond what should be possible. William surviving fire being proof that he wouldn't stop, that he couldn't be stopped easily, that he required more than burning, more than fire, more than destruction of facility, requiring complete ending, requiring trap, requiring Henry's plan, requiring comprehensive destruction, fire not being enough, burning not being sufficient, William persisting beyond this, continuing beyond this, surviving beyond this, being Springtrap after fire, being burned corpse in burned suit, being damaged, being deteriorated, being worse, being more horrific, being less human and more mechanical, being less William and more purple guy, being less person and more monster, being Springtrap after fire, being examined next, being Scraptrap, being continued persistence, being refusal to die, being William Afton surviving first fire, being beginning of pattern, being proof that he would persist, being evidence that he wouldn't stop, being continued evil, being examined after rest. Let this era rest. As this section concludes, understanding that Springtrap era showed William continuing his evil despite being corpse in suit, that he was active at Fazbear's Fright, that he hunted night guards, that he survived fire, that he persisted beyond burning, that he refused to die, that he continued being threat, being purple guy in physical form, being corpse animated by evil, being villain that wouldn't stop, Springtrap being William Afton's persistence embodied, being proof that he would continue regardless of death, regardless of destruction, regardless of anything except complete ending, being examined now, being understood, being ready to continue, to explore Scraptrap, to understand his continued survival, to follow his journey to FNAF 6, to comprehend Henry's trap, to examine second fire, to understand William's supposed ending, being continued after rest, being examined soon, being William's story progressing, being Springtrap era understood, being ready now to rest, to sleep with understanding that William survived death, survived imprisonment, survived fire, that he continued as Springtrap, that he was dangerous still, that he hunted still, that he was evil still. Being able to rest knowing this, being able to sleep understanding William's persistence, being ready to continue after rest, after letting this settle, after sleeping with knowledge that William wouldn't stop, wouldn't die, wouldn't end easily, being Springtrap, being William, being purple guy persisting. Part 5, Scraptrap and Final Fire, Henry's Trap, 2023. As we continue deeper into William's story, as most listeners have drifted into peaceful sleep, those still present will explore William's transformation into Scraptrap, his continued persistence after surviving the first fire, how he deteriorated further, how he became even less human and more mechanical, how he crawled from burning Fazbear's Fright as damaged corpse in damaged suit, how he continued existing despite everything that should have killed him, Springtrap becoming Scraptrap, being William after fire, being burned version of already dead form, being corpse that survived burning, being remains that persisted beyond destruction. William continuing, persisting, refusing to die, refusing to stop, refusing to end, becoming Scraptrap, being examined now, being understood as continued evolution, as further transformation, as William becoming less and less human with each change, each death, each survival. Scraptrap being William at his most deteriorated, being corpse most decayed, being suit most damaged, being form most removed from humanity, being purple guy in truest physical manifestation, being evil incarnate, being villain embodied, being William Afton persisting beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond what should be possible, surviving fire, continuing afterward, existing as Scraptrap, being drawn to Henry's trap, being lured to final location, being gathered with other animatronics for Henry's plan, for comprehensive destruction. For fire meant to end everything, to free all spirits, to destroy all possessed animatronics, including William, including Scraptrap, including Purple Guy. Henry's trap being designed specifically to end what William started, to destroy the murderer, to eliminate the villain, to finally end William Afton, being examined now completely. Springtrap to Scraptrap. Physical deterioration. After surviving Fazbear's Fright fire, Springtrap was damaged, burned, deteriorated, the suit being scorched, being partially destroyed, the organic remains being further damaged, being burned, being more decayed. William surviving but being worse, being more damaged, being less intact, becoming Scraptrap, being new designation for deteriorated form, Scraptrap being what Springtrap became after fire, being burned version, being damaged iteration, the physical appearance being more grotesque, being more obviously corpse, the suit being more torn, more damaged, more revealing of what was inside, of the remains, of the bones, of the decay. Scraptrap being visually horrifying, being clearly corpse in suit, being obviously dead body in costume, the pretense being gone, the concealment being removed, Scraptrap being honest about what William was, being corpse animated by consciousness, being remains moved by evil, being dead body controlled by malicious will, being horror made visible, being what William became, being truth of his existence made obvious, the deterioration being complete, being profound, being evidence of fire damage, of survival at cost, of persistence requiring sacrifice. William continuing but being damaged, being worse, being more obviously wrong, being Scraptrap, being examined in detail now. The suit repairs being evident, Scraptrap showing signs of William attempting to maintain his form, attempting to fix damage, attempting to hold himself together, wires being visible, being crude repairs, being evidence that William was conscious enough, aware enough, capable enough to perform basic maintenance on his mechanical body, on the suit that contained his remains. William, as Scraptrap, being actively maintaining his form, keeping himself functional, preventing complete deterioration, being corpse that could repair itself, being remains that were self-maintaining, being evidence of William's determination, of his refusal to simply decay, to simply fall apart, to simply end. William actively working to preserve his existence, to maintain his form, to continue being Scraptrap, being Purple Guy refusing to deteriorate completely, being villain maintaining himself through sheer will, through determination, through refusal to accept ending, even through slow decay, even through gradual destruction. William fighting entropy, fighting decomposition, fighting natural processes that should end him, maintaining himself, preserving himself, continuing himself, being Scraptrap, being self-maintaining corpse, being remains that refused to simply decay, being William Afton's determination made physical, being Purple Guy's persistence embodied in deteriorating form, the personality seemingly intact, William as Scraptrap being same William, same evil, same malice, same determination, being villain unchanged despite physical changes, despite deterioration, despite fire damage, William remaining himself, remaining Purple Guy, remaining murderer, remaining dangerous, being consistent across forms, across deaths, across transformations, William being fundamentally unchanged, being essentially same person despite being corpse, despite being burned, despite being Scraptrap, his evil persisting, his malice enduring, his danger continuing, Scraptrap being William in deteriorated form, but being William still, being Purple Guy, obviously, being child murderer continuing, being villain persisting, being monster maintaining identity across transformations, William being remarkably consistent, being same person in different forms, being evil that didn't change just because body did, being consciousness that maintained itself despite physical deterioration, being William Afton regardless of form, being Purple Guy regardless of appearance, being villain regardless of transformation, being examined now, being understood as continuation rather than new character, being same William, same evil, same threat, just more damaged, more deteriorated, more obviously corpse, being Scraptrap, being William, being Purple Guy, being examined comprehensively. FNAF 6. Pizzeria Simulator. The trap is set. Henry Emily's plan in Freddy Fazbear's pizza place being comprehensive, being years in development, being carefully designed trap meant to gather all possessed animatronics, including William, including Scraptrap, including the murderer who killed Henry's daughter, who destroyed Henry's dream, who corrupted everything Henry created. Henry's plan being personal, being motivated by need to end William, to stop the man who murdered Charlotte, to destroy the partner who became monster, to eliminate the villain who caused decades of horror. Henry creating Freddy Fazbear's pizza place as trap, as gathering location, as place where possessed animatronics would come, would be lured, would be contained, the salvage system being part of trap. Player bringing animatronics into pizzeria, into building, into labyrinth that Henry designed, into location from which they were no escape. Henry ensuring that once animatronics were inside, they couldn't leave, would be trapped, would be contained until fire, until destruction, until ending. The plan being to burn everything, to destroy all possessed animatronics simultaneously, to free all spirits including Charlotte, to end William, to eliminate Scraptrap, to finally stop Purple Guy. Henry's plan being ultimate confrontation between partners, between creator and destroyer, between father who lost daughter and man who killed her, being personal, being decades in making, being Henry's final act. Scraptrap was lured to location, being drawn to pizzeria, being attracted by something, by promise of children possibly, by opportunity to continue evil possibly, by being William unable to resist, unable to avoid, being murderer drawn to site where murders happened, being Purple Guy returning to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza because that's what he did, where he operated, what he knew, Scraptrap coming to pizzeria, being salvaged, being brought into building, being contained in labyrinth, being trapped without knowing it, William being caught, being trapped, being exactly where Henry wanted him, being positioned for ending, for destruction, for fire. William walking into trap, being lured by his own nature, by his own evil, by being unable to stop being villain, being murderer who couldn't resist opportunity, being purple guy who returned to scene of crimes, being William Afton continuing patterns that made him predictable, that allowed Henry to trap him, that enabled Henry's plan. Scraptrap being in building, being trapped, being contained with Scrap Baby. Elizabeth Afton, William's daughter, with Molten Freddy, containing multiple spirits, with Lefty, containing Charlotte Emily, Henry's daughter. All of them being gathered, being trapped, being present for ending, for fire, for Henry's final solution, for comprehensive destruction meant to free all spirits, to end all possession, to destroy all animatronics, to eliminate William, to stop Purple Guy, to end William Afton finally, permanently, completely. Henry's speech to William. Final confrontation. Henry's speech in FNAF 6 ending being addressed to everyone, to all animatronics, to all spirits, to Michael if present, and particularly to William, to Scraptrap, to the murderer, to the man who was once partner, who became monster. Henry speaking to William directly, addressing him, confronting him, telling him things that needed to be said. Henry's words to William being final confrontation between partners, between victim's father and murderer, between creator and destroyer. Henry speaking to William about what he did, about what he became, about what he destroyed. Henry acknowledging William's presence, acknowledging that William was there, was trapped, was about to die, was about to be destroyed. Henry telling William that he knew, that he understood, that he recognized what William was, what he did, what he became. Henry confronting William with truth, with acknowledgement, with understanding that William was murderer, was evil, was monster, was person who destroyed everything, who murdered Charlotte, who killed children, who created horror. Henry acknowledging all of this, confronting William with it, telling him directly, speaking to murderer, addressing monster, confronting villain, being father speaking to daughter's killer, being partner speaking to betrayer, being creator speaking to destroyer. Henry's words being powerful, being emotional, being final statement before destruction. The specific words including recognition that William wouldn't be content to disappear, that he would continue, that he would persist. Henry understanding William's nature, understanding that he refused to die, that he persisted beyond death, that he was Scraptrap, was burned corpse still being evil, still being dangerous, still being threat. Henry acknowledging this, understanding this, recognizing that William had to be destroyed completely, had to be burned, had to be eliminated thoroughly because anything less wouldn't work, wouldn't stop him, wouldn't end him. William being villain who required comprehensive destruction, who couldn't be allowed to continue, who had to be ended completely. Henry understanding this, planning for this, creating trap that would work, that would destroy William, that would eliminate Scraptrap, that would end Purple Guy finally, permanently, completely. Henry's plan being specifically designed to stop William, to destroy the man who wouldn't die, to eliminate the villain who persisted beyond reason. Henry understanding what was required, understanding that fire had to be hot enough, long enough, complete enough to destroy William absolutely, to prevent any survival, to ensure ending was final, was permanent, was complete. Henry planning for this, designing for this, executing plan that would end William, that would destroy Scraptrap, that would eliminate Purple Guy, that would stop Child Murderer, that would end the villain, that would finish the monster. The Labyrinth and the Fire. Comprehensive destruction. The labyrinth being crucial element, Henry mentioning it specifically, having designed location so animatronics couldn't escape, so they would be trapped, so they couldn't leave before fire. The architecture being deliberate trap, being maze with no exit, being building designed to contain, to imprison, to hold animatronics until destruction. Henry's engineering being used for good purpose, for stopping evil, for destroying what needed destroying. The labyrinth ensuring that William couldn't escape, that Scraptrap was trapped, that Purple Guy couldn't survive this time, couldn't crawl away from fire, couldn't persist beyond burning, being held in place, being contained in building, being present for complete destruction. Henry ensuring William's ending, ensuring murderer couldn't escape, ensuring villain would be destroyed, the labyrinth being perfect trap, being inescapable prison, being container holding William for destruction, being mechanism ensuring his ending, Henry's plan being meticulous, being thorough, being designed to succeed where everything else failed, designed to finally destroy William Afton, to eliminate Scraptrap, to end Purple Guy completely, permanently, finally. The fire starting, building burning, flames consuming everything, heat being intense, being hot enough to destroy animatronics, to melt metal, to eliminate remnant, to free spirits, to destroy William, the fire being comprehensive, being thorough, being complete destruction, Henry remaining in building, dying with animatronics, sacrificing himself to ensure fire worked, to guarantee destruction was complete, to make certain William died, that Scraptrap was destroyed, that Purple Guy ended, Henry dying to kill William, to end murderer, to destroy monster, to eliminate villain, Henry's sacrifice being ultimate act, being father giving life to end daughter's killer, being creator destroying destroyer, being partner finally stopping former partner, being Henry Emily ending William Afton, the fire burning, consuming, destroying, animatronics being eliminated, spirits being freed supposedly, William being destroyed, Scraptrap being burned, Purple Guy being ended, the fire being hot enough, being thorough enough, being complete enough, supposedly, maybe, being ambiguous like everything in FNAF, whether fire truly destroyed William being unclear, being uncertain, whether Scraptrap was truly eliminated being questionable, whether Purple Guy truly ended being debatable, the ambiguity being present, being typical, being FNAF's refusal to provide certain closure, but Henry's attempt being clear, being genuine, being comprehensive plan executed successfully, fire burning, building destroyed, animatronics eliminated, William supposedly ended, Scraptrap supposedly destroyed, Purple Guy supposedly finished, being Henry's success, being murderer's ending, being villain's destruction supposedly, maybe, being examined next in his digital form, being continued despite fire, being persisted beyond burning, being William refusing to die even after Henry's trap, being explored after rest. Supposed ending and ambiguity. The ending being presented as final, as comprehensive, as destruction of all possessed animatronics, as freeing of all spirits, as elimination of William, as ending of horror, FNAF 6 being designed as conclusion, as finale, as ending to story that began with Charlotte's death, story of Henry and William, of creator and destroyer, of father and murderer, of partners who became enemies, of tragedy that spanned decades. FNAF 6 ending this, supposedly. Ending with fire, with destruction, with Henry's sacrifice, with William's elimination, with everyone dying, with everything ending, with comprehensive conclusion to story, but ambiguity being present, being inherent, being FNAF's approach, whether spirits were truly freed being unclear, whether William was truly destroyed being uncertain, whether ending was real or temporary being debatable, subsequent games suggesting continuation, suggesting William persisted somehow, suggesting Purple Guy survived somehow, suggesting villain wasn't destroyed completely, suggesting horror continued, suggesting ending wasn't ending, being typical FNAF, being refusal to provide certain closure, being maintenance of ambiguity, being story that doesn't end cleanly, being horror that persists beyond supposed conclusion, William particularly being uncertain, being ambiguous whether he truly died, whether Scraptrap was truly destroyed, whether fire eliminated him completely, evidence suggesting maybe not, suggesting he continued, suggesting he persisted into digital form, suggesting consciousness uploaded, suggesting he became Glitchtrap, suggesting he survived again, suggesting fire wasn't enough, suggesting Henry's trap failed partially, destroying William's physical form but not eliminating his consciousness, not ending his existence, not stopping Purple Guy completely, William persisting beyond Henry's fire, beyond comprehensive trap, beyond everything designed to end him, being examined next, being digital form, being Glitchtrap, being William's continued persistence, being refusal to die, being evolution into new form, being examined after rest. Let this fire rest. As this section concludes, understanding that Scraptrap was trapped by Henry, that William walked into comprehensive trap, that he was burned in fire meant to end him, that Henry sacrificed himself to ensure destruction, that Scraptrap was supposedly eliminated, that William was supposedly ended, that Purple Guy was supposedly destroyed, but ambiguity remaining, uncertainty persisting, possibility existing that William survived somehow, that he continued somehow, that he persisted somehow, being typical of his character, being consistent with his refusal to die, being examined next in digital form, being explored as Glitchtrap, being continued persistence, being William Afton refusing to end, being Purple Guy surviving even Henry's trap, being examined after rest, being understood soon, being continued after sleep, being ready now to rest with understanding that William was trapped, was burned, was supposedly destroyed, supposedly ended, supposedly finished, but maybe not, maybe continuing, maybe persisting, being William Afton being consistent, being Purple Guy refusing to stop, being villain who wouldn't die, being examined comprehensively, being understood deeply, being ready to rest now, to sleep with knowledge of Henry's trap, of Scraptrap's supposed ending, of William's supposed destruction, being able to drift into dreams knowing this part of story, being ready to continue after rest, after letting this settle, after sleeping with understanding that William was burned, supposedly destroyed, supposedly ended, but ambiguously, uncertainly, possibly continuing, being examined next in digital form, being ready after rest. Part 6, Digital Resurrection, Glitchtrap and Modern Evil, 2020s. As we drift deeper still, as most listeners sleep peacefully, we explore William's most recent form, his digital resurrection, how he persisted beyond fire, beyond physical destruction, beyond Henry's trap. William's consciousness somehow surviving, somehow continuing, somehow being preserved in circuit board salvaged from fire, from burned pizzeria, from destroyed location, circuit board being scanned into VR game, into help wanted, William's consciousness being uploaded, being digitized, being transformed from physical presence into digital entity, William becoming Glitchtrap, becoming digital virus, becoming consciousness without body, without physical form, existing in virtual space, in video game, in digital realm, William adapting, William evolving, William continuing despite everything, refusing to die even when physical form was destroyed, persisting beyond body, continuing beyond flesh and metal, becoming pure consciousness, pure malice, pure evil in digital form, being Glitchtrap, being William without physical limitations, being Purple Guy evolved into new medium, being child murderer as computer virus, being villain as digital entity, being examined now, being understood as latest evolution, as newest transformation, as William's refusal to die made manifest again, being persistence beyond physical existence, being consciousness continuing despite body's destruction, being William Afton in 2020s, being Purple Guy in modern era, being villain who adapted to new medium, who found new way to persist, who continued being threat, being examined comprehensively now. Circuit board and digital upload from physical to digital. After FNAF 6 fire, after supposed destruction, after Henry's trap, after comprehensive burning meant to eliminate everything, after destruction of all animatronics, after ending of all physical forms, something survived. Circuit board surviving, piece of Scraptrap surviving, fragment of William surviving, being salvaged from ruins, being recovered from burned location, being found by Fazbear Entertainment's successor company, by people creating VR game, by developers making help wanted, circuit board being old, being damaged, being from original animatronic, being scanned into game, being digitized, content being uploaded, data being extracted, circuit board containing more than just code, containing more than just programming, containing William, containing consciousness, containing remnant somehow, containing essence of Purple Guy, being scanned, being uploaded, being digitized, William's consciousness entering game, becoming part of code, becoming Glitchtrap, becoming digital entity, being virus, being malicious program, being consciousness in software, William being transformed from physical to digital, from corpse in suit to data in game, from Scraptrap to Glitchtrap, being evolution, being adaptation, being William finding new medium, new form, new way to persist, being refusal to die, being determination to continue, being evil adapting to circumstances, being villain evolving with technology, being Purple Guy becoming digital threat, being child murderer as computer virus, being examined in detail, the transformation being profound, being complete change in nature, William going from physical entity to digital entity, from having body to being pure consciousness, from existing in physical space to existing in virtual space, from being corpse in suit to being data in game, the transformation being more complete than any previous transformation, being more fundamental than becoming Springtrap or Scraptrap, being change in basic nature, in fundamental existence, William becoming something new, something different, something unprecedented, being consciousness without body, being awareness without physical form, being entity that existed in code, in software, in digital realm, William being truly disembodied, being pure consciousness, being evil without physical limitations, being able to move through game, through software, through digital networks, being able to influence, to corrupt, to spread like virus. William as Glitchtrap being more dangerous in some ways, being able to reach more people, being able to influence through game, through VR headset, through digital connection, being able to corrupt players, to influence users, to spread himself through technology. William becoming digital plague, becoming virus spreading through software, becoming corruption spreading through networks, being new form of evil, being modern threat, being villain adapted to digital age, being purple guy evolved for 2020s, being William Afton as digital entity being examined thoroughly now. Glitchtrap, digital manifestation and abilities. Glitchtrap appeared in Help Wanted VR game, being entity that players encountered, being rabbit character that seemed wrong, that behaved strangely, that was corrupted, being Glitchtrap being obvious but also being hidden, being present in game but not supposed to be there, being entity that emerged, that revealed itself gradually, that corrupted game from within. Glitchtrap being William's digital form, being how he appeared in virtual space, being rabbit costume, being Spring Bonnie reference, being callback to what William wore, being Purple Rabbit, being digital version of costume he used to murder children, being appropriate appearance, being William choosing form that referenced his crimes, that connected to his past, that was Spring Bonnie in digital form, being Glitchtrap, being rabbit that waved, that gestured, that beckoned, that tried to establish connection with player, trying to influence them, trying to corrupt them, trying to spread himself to them. Glitchtrap's behavior being predatory, being manipulative, being William continuing his evil in digital form, being purple guy pursuing victims through different means, being child murderer adapting methods to digital medium, being villain continuing, being monster persisting, being evil adapting, the abilities being significant, Glitchtrap being able to influence players, to corrupt them, to spread himself to them through VR headset, through digital connection, through interface between game and player. William being able to reach through virtual space into physical space somehow, being able to affect players' minds, being able to implant suggestions, being able to corrupt psychology, being able to create follower, create vanny, create person in physical world who would do his bidding, who would follow his instructions, who would be his hands, his physical presence. William, in digital form, being able to affect physical world through human proxy, through corrupted follower, through vanny acting on his instructions, Glitchtrap being able to spread, being able to corrupt multiple people potentially, being able to reach through digital networks, through internet, through connected devices, being potential for widespread corruption, for influence beyond single location, for William's evil reaching more people than ever before. Digital form giving him capabilities he never had physically, giving him reach he never had as human or as Springtrap. William as Glitchtrap being potentially most dangerous form, being able to influence many people, being able to spread corruption, being able to create network of followers, being digital virus spreading through human population, being consciousness able to corrupt others, being William's evil amplified through technology, through digital medium, through modern capabilities. Vanny and physical influence. Digital evil made physical. Vanny being Glitchtrap's follower, being person corrupted by him, being player a help wanted who became influenced by William's digital consciousness, who was corrupted by Glitchtrap, who became Purple Guy's follower, who became William's physical presence, Vanny being how Glitchtrap affected physical world, being how digital William took physical actions, being proxy, being follower, being corrupted person acting on William's behalf, Vanny wearing rabbit costume, being physical manifestation of Glitchtrap, being human acting as William's agent, being living person corrupted by dead murderer's digital consciousness, being profound horror, being new form of William's evil, being his ability to corrupt others, to make them act for him, to spread his influence beyond himself. Vanny being evidence that William in digital form was dangerous, was capable of affecting physical world, was able to continue his evil despite being consciousness in software, being able to act through others, to corrupt them into acting for him, to create followers who would do terrible things, who would continue his work, who would be Purple Guy's physical presence, being Vanny, being reluctant follower, being follower suffix, being person corrupted by Glitchtrap, being human acting as William's proxy, being how digital evil becomes physical threat, the corruption being psychological, being mental influence, Glitchtrap affecting Vanny's mind, affecting her personality, affecting her choices, making her want to follow him, making her desire to please him, making her willing to act on his instructions, the corruption being profound, being transformation of personality, being change in fundamental nature, Vanny being different person after Glitchtrap's influence, being corrupted, being twisted, being made into follower, into agent, into proxy for digital evil. The horror being that William could do this, that Glitchtrap could corrupt people, that digital William could reach through technology into human minds and change them, corrupt them, make them into versions of himself, make them into Purple Guys, make them into child murderers potentially. Vanny being evidence of this capability, being proof that Glitchtrap was dangerous, being demonstration that William in digital form could create more Williams, could spread his evil, could corrupt others into being him, being multiplication of evil, being spread of corruption, being William's influence expanding beyond himself, being Purple Guy creating more Purple Guys, being digital virus spreading psychological corruption, being examined thoroughly, being understood as evolution of William's evil, being new form of his danger, being modern manifestation of his persistence, modern threat and continued presence. Glitchtrap representing William in modern era, being how he existed in 2020s, being his presence in current timeline, being proof that he survived everything, that he persisted beyond all attempts to end him, that he continued despite fires and traps and comprehensive destruction, William as Glitchtrap being evidence that he was unkillable, was unstoppable, was eternal, being villain who adapted to every circumstance, who found new forms, who persisted in new media, who continued regardless of what happened to physical body, being consciousness that couldn't be destroyed, being evil that wouldn't end, being Purple Guy who would always return, being William Afton at his most persistent, being villain who literally couldn't die, who moved from physical to digital, who continued in new form, who remained threat, who was dangerous still, who could corrupt others, who could spread influence, who could act through proxies, who was present in modern era, being current threat, being active danger, being William continuing, being purple guy persisting, being examined as proof that he would never stop, that he couldn't be stopped, that he was eternal villain, being consciousness that persisted beyond everything, being evil that adapted to everything, being William Afton, proving that he was ultimate FNAF villain, being purple guy, demonstrating that he would continue forever, being character who refused to end, being story that wouldn't conclude, being horror that persisted, being examined now as modern threat, as current danger, as William in 2020s, as Glitchtrap being active presence, being continuing evil, being persistent threat, the implications being profound, being evidence that William might never be stopped, that he might continue forever, that he might be truly eternal villain, being consciousness that survived physical destruction, that moved into digital realm, that could potentially spread through networks, through internet, through all connected devices, Glitchtrap being potentially able to reach everywhere, to corrupt anyone, to spread William's evil globally, being horrifying possibility, being potential for William's consciousness to become truly universal threat, being purple guy able to reach everyone, being child murderer's influence able to spread everywhere, being a nightmare scenario where William becomes inescapable, becomes omnipresent, becomes corruption that affects everyone, being theoretical extreme but being possible within established mechanics, being what Glitchtrap represents, being William's potential for complete spread, for total corruption, for universal influence, being examined as ultimate extension of his persistence, as final form of his refusal to die, as proof that William Afton was truly eternal villain, being purple guy who would never stop, being murderer who would never end, being consciousness that would persist forever, being examined now, being understood completely, being ready to move to final analysis, to understanding what William means, to comprehending his significance, to examining him thematically rather than narratively, being almost done, being nearly finished, being ready soon for conclusion, for final rest, being examined after letting this settle, after resting with understanding that William became digital, that he persisted beyond physical form, that he continued as Glitchtrap, that he was modern threat, being ready to continue after rest. Let digital evil rest. As this section concludes, understanding that William became Glitchtrap, that he persisted beyond physical death, that he survived as digital consciousness, that he corrupted others, that he influenced through technology, that he remained threat in modern era, that he was proof of eternal evil, that he was villain who couldn't die. Being understood now, being comprehensive examination of digital William, of Glitchtrap, of modern purple guy, of William's latest form, being ready now to move to final analysis, to thematic examination, to understanding what William means rather than just what he did, being examined after rest, being continued after sleep, being ready now to rest with knowledge of Glitchtrap, of digital William, of modern evil, being able to sleep understanding his persistence, his adaptation, his continued threat, being ready after rest to continue to final sections, to thematic analysis, to understand in meaning, to examining significance, being almost finished, being nearly done, being William's story nearly told, being ready to complete after rest. Part 7. The Meaning of William Afton. Understanding the Ultimate Villain. As we approach the final understanding, as nearly all listeners sleep deeply, we examine what William Afton means, what he represents, why he matters as villain, what themes his character embodies. William being more than just murderer, more than just antagonist, more than just child killer. Being symbol, being representation of ideas, being character whose meaning extends beyond literal actions. William representing evil that refuses to die, representing corruption that persists, representing malice that endures, representing how some evils continue regardless of attempts to stop them. William being eternal villain, being character who literally won't die, who persists across multiple forms, who adapts to circumstances, who continues regardless of destruction. His persistence being thematic, being symbolic, being representation of how evil endures, how corruption persists, how some darkness never ends. William being this, being evil personified, being villain as concept, being purple guy as symbol of enduring malice, being examined now thematically, being understood symbolically, being analyzed as representation rather than just character, William being meaningful beyond his crimes, being significant beyond his actions, being important as symbol, as theme, as representation of ideas that make him perfect FNAF villain, that make him enduring antagonist, that make him character worth examining, being explored now completely. Evil that refuses to die. Primary theme. William's primary symbolic significance being that he represents evil that refuses to die, that persists despite attempts to stop it, that continues despite destruction, that adapts despite setbacks, that endures despite consequences. William literally refusing to die. Being thematic statement, being idea made physical, being concept embodied in character. William dying in springlock failure and continuing, being killed and persisting, being destroyed and surviving, being burned and returning, being eliminated and resurrecting. William's multiple forms being evidence of this theme. Springtrap being dead murderer continuing, Scraptrap being burned, corpse persisting, Glitchtrap being consciousness surviving physical destruction, each form being William adapting, being villain finding new way to continue, being evil persisting despite attempts to end it, William being embodiment of idea that some evils don't die, don't end, don't stop, that they continue finding new forms, new methods, new ways to persist. William being this made character, being evil's persistence personified, being concept that darkness endures given physical form across multiple iterations. William being proof that evil doesn't end easily, doesn't stop simply, doesn't conclude cleanly, requiring constant vigilance, constant opposition, constant fighting. Being evil that must be opposed continuously because it will continue regardless. Being William's thematic significance, being what he represents, being why he's perfect FNAF villain, being evil that matches series tone, being villain appropriate for franchise that refuses clear endings, that maintains ambiguity, that persists across games. William being character embodying FNAF's approach to horror, being villain that won't end, being evil that won't stop, being darkness that won't conclude, being examined thoroughly as a thematic element, the persistence being not just physical but ideological, William's evil spreading through corruption of others, through Vanny, through potential followers, through influence that extends beyond himself. William's evil being not just what he does, but what he causes others to do, what he corrupts others into doing, his influence being persistent, being enduring, being continuing even when he's not physically present, being spread through digital means, through psychological corruption, through creating followers who carry his evil forward. William's persistence being both literal and metaphorical, being both physical continuations and ideological spread, being evil that endures in multiple ways, being malice that persists through multiple mechanisms, being William being comprehensive symbol for enduring evil, being complete representation of how darkness continues, being examined as multi-layered theme, as complex symbolism, as character representing evil's persistence in all forms, physical and digital and psychological and ideological, being William Afton as ultimate symbol of continuing evil, being Purple Guy as embodiment of darkness that won't end, being examined comprehensively, being understood deeply, being recognized as thematic perfection for FNAF franchise, being villain appropriate for series about horrors that persist, about tragedies that continue, about evil that endures across decades, father who destroyed his family, familial tragedy, William being father who destroyed his own family, being significant thematically, being symbol of how evil corrupts everything, even familial bonds, even parent-child relationships, even love that should be unconditional, William's relationship with his children being corrupted, being destroyed, being perverted into horror. Crying child dying because William failed to protect him, because William created environment where child was terrified, where bullying was possible, where death occurred. William being responsible for son's death through negligence, through failure, through being bad father. Elizabeth dying because William created circus baby, because his creation killed his daughter, because his engineering was prioritized over his child's safety. William telling Elizabeth to avoid animatronic but not ensuring she avoided it, not protecting her adequately. Elizabeth dying because William created danger and didn't sufficiently protect daughter from it. Michael being twisted by family dysfunction, becoming bully, causing brother's death, living with guilt, being scooped by father's creations, dying and continuing as corpse. Michael's entire tragic life being result of William's failures, of William's evil, of William being terrible father, William's family being completely destroyed, all three children dying, all three suffering, all three being victims of William's evil, of William's failures, of William being monster, William destroying his own family, being thematic statement about evil's comprehensive destruction, about how corruption affects everything, about how villainy destroys even what villain might claim to love. William's family being evidence that he destroyed everything, that his evil was complete, that his corruption was total, that he was monster who harmed everyone including his own children. The familial destruction being particularly tragic because William presumably loved his children, at least initially, at least somewhat, being father who presumably cared, who presumably wanted good things for children, who presumably had some parental love, but being unable to express it healthily, being unable to prioritize it properly, being unable to let it prevent his evil. William's love for children being insufficient, being inadequate, being overwhelmed by whatever drove him to murder, to evil, to becoming Purple Guy. William being father who failed catastrophically, who destroyed what he should have protected, who harmed what he should have nurtured, who killed what he should have preserved, being inversion of fatherhood, being perversion of parental role, being father as destroyer rather than protector, being parent as danger rather than safety, William being anti-father, being opposite of what father should be, being symbol of parental failure at most extreme, being examined as representation of how evil corrupts familial bonds, how villainy destroys family structures, how some people destroy everything including their own children. William being this, being father who destroyed family, being parent who failed completely, being man who harmed everyone including those he supposedly loved, being thematic element examining darkness within families, examining evil of parental failure, examining horror of family as site of destruction rather than protection. William being perfect symbol for this, being character embodying familial corruption, being father destroying family, being examined as warning, as horror, as representation of how some parents fail, how some families are destroyed from within, how some evils corrupt even strongest bonds, being William Afton as symbol of familial destruction, being purple guy as father who destroyed everything, creator who corrupted his creations, perversion of innovation. William being engineer, who corrupted his own creations, being thematically significant, being symbol of how innovation can be twisted, how technology can be perverted, how creation can become destruction. William creating animatronics for entertainment and corrupting them into murder weapons, murder sites, murder containers. William taking technology meant to bring joy and using it to cause death, taking entertainment and transforming it into horror, taking creations and corrupting them completely. William being creator who destroyed his creations, who perverted their purposes, who twisted their functions. Animatronics meant to entertain children being used to murder children, to hide children's bodies, to contain children's spirits, being complete inversion of purpose, being total perversion of function. William taking Henry's dream of bringing joy through mechanical entertainment and corrupting it into nightmare of mechanical horror. William being corrupter, being perverter, being destroyer disguised as creator, being engineer who used skills for evil, who applied brilliance to horror, who took talent for innovation and corrupted it into talent for murder. William being symbol of how creation can be twisted, how innovation can be corrupted, how technology can be perverted into serving evil purposes, being representation of science without ethics, being embodiment of engineering without morality, being personification of innovation without humanity. William being creator as destroyer, being engineer as murderer, being innovator as corrupter. The spring Bonnie suit being particular symbol, being Henry's creation that William wore to murder children, being entertainment animatronic that became murder weapon, being costume meant to delight children being used to gain their trust before killing them, being complete perversion of purpose, being total corruption of function. William taking something designed to bring joy and using it to cause ultimate suffering, being thematic statement about corruption, about perversion, about evil's ability to twist anything. William being person who corrupted everything he touched, who perverted everything he used, who destroyed everything he created or co-created, his relationship with creations being purely exploitative, being purely corruptive. William seeing animatronics as tools, as means to ends, as instruments for achieving goals, never seeing them as Henry saw them, as sources of joy, as gifts to children, as positive innovations. William seeing only utility, only function, only how they could serve his purposes, being engineer without artist's soul, being creator without creator's love, being innovator without innovator's joy. William being purely functional in relationship with creations, purely exploitative, purely corruptive, being symbol of creation twisted into destruction, being representation of innovation corrupted into horror, being examination of how technology can serve evil, being thematic element exploring darkness of creation, being William Afton as creator who destroyed, being Purple Guy as engineer who corrupted, being examined as a symbol of how human capability can be twisted toward evil purposes, how brilliance can serve malice, how innovation can enable horror. Ambiguous motivations, the unknowable villain. William's motivations being deliberately ambiguous, being never fully explained, being subject of theories and debates and interpretations. William being villain whose psychology remains mysterious, whose reasons remain unclear, whose goals remain ambiguous. Being intentional choice by Scott Cawthon, presumably. Being deliberate ambiguity that makes William more interesting, more complex, more worthy of analysis. William being villain we must interpret, must theorize about, must try to understand without being given certain answers. Being character whose evil might be motivated by grief or by ambition or by madness or by something else entirely. William being interpretable multiple ways, being understandable through multiple lenses, being analyzable from multiple perspectives, his motivations being either tragic, grief over crying child driving him to murder in desperate attempt to understand death and achieve resurrection, or purely evil, psychopath seeking immortality or power or simply enjoying killing, or complex mixture, or something else entirely. William being ambiguous, being unknowable fully, being character whose internal state we must construct from external evidence, whose psychology we must infer from actions, whose reasons we must theorize from scattered clues, being deliberately mysterious villain, being intentionally ambiguous character, being person whose motivations matter but remain unclear, being examined as thematic choice, being understood as deliberate ambiguity that enriches character, that makes him more interesting, that invites continued analysis and discussion and theorizing. The ambiguity serving multiple purposes, making William more realistic, real people's motivations being complex, being mixed, being not easily understood, making him more frightening, unexplained evil being scarier than explained evil, making him more interesting, mysterious villain being more engaging than fully explained villain, making him more worthy of continued examination, ambiguity inviting ongoing analysis. William's unclear motivations being feature rather than bug, being intentional rather than oversight, being choice that makes him better villain, making him more complex character, making him more thematically rich symbol. William being villain whose evil doesn't need complete explanation, whose motivations don't require certain understanding, whose psychology remains mysterious, allowing different interpretations, different readings, different theoretical frameworks, being villain appropriate for franchise that embraces ambiguity, that refuses certain answers, that maintains mystery across games. William being character matching FNAF's storytelling approach, being antagonist appropriate for series that tells story through scattered pieces requiring assembly, being villain whose complete understanding is impossible by design, being examined as deliberate ambiguity, as intentional mystery, as choice that enriches character rather than diminishing him. William being unknowable, being part of what makes him interesting, being part of what makes him effective villain, being part of his thematic significance, being symbol not just of evil, but of evil's inscrutability, not just of malice, but of malice's complexity, not just of villainy, but of villainy''s ambiguity, being William Afton as unknowable evil, being Purple Guy whose motivations remain mysterious, being examined as perfect FNAF villain precisely because he resists complete understanding, precisely because he remains ambiguous, precisely because he stays mysterious. Perfect FNAF villain. Why William matters. William being perfect, Five Nights at Freddy's villain because he embodies franchise's themes, represents its approach to horror, matches its storytelling style, complements its mystery-focused narrative. William being villain who refuses to die, matching franchise that refuses clear endings, being evil that persists matching series that continues across many games, being ambiguous character matching story that maintains mystery, being corrupter of childhood entertainment, matching franchise that perverts children's entertainment into horror. William being thematically perfect for FNAF, being antagonist who embodies everything franchise is about, being villain who represents corruption of innocence, persistence of evil, ambiguity of truth, complexity of horror. William being more than just murderer, being symbol, being representation, being embodiment of FNAF's themes, being character who makes franchise work, who provides emotional core, who creates personal stakes, who transforms abstract horror into personal tragedy. William being necessary, being crucial, being essential to FNAF's success, being villain who defines franchise, who shapes story, who creates horror. William Afton being examined as perfect antagonist for Five Nights at Freddy's, being Purple Guy as ideal villain for franchise, being child murderer as appropriate horror for series, being examined comprehensively, being understood completely as thematic perfection, as character perfectly suited to franchise, as villain ideally designed for FNAF's needs, being William Afton, being Purple Guy, being ultimate FNAF antagonist, being examined fully, being understood deeply, being recognized as villain who makes franchise what it is, being essential element, being core component, being character without whom FNAF would be different, would be less, would be missing crucial element, being William being important, being significant, being examined now completely, being understood thoroughly, being ready now for conclusion, for final rest, for ending that brings everything together, for complete understanding of William Afton, being almost finished, being nearly done, being ready to conclude after rest. Let these meanings rest. As this section concludes, understanding William's thematic significance, his symbolic meaning, what he represents beyond literal actions, William being evil that refuses to die, being father who destroyed family, being creator who corrupted creations, being unknowable villain whose motivations remain ambiguous, being perfect FNAF antagonist, whose character embodies franchise's themes, being examined now completely, being understood fully, being recognized as complex symbol, as rich thematic element, as character whose significance extends beyond plot, beyond crimes, beyond literal evil into territory of meaning, of representation, of symbolism. William being meaningful, being significant, being important not just for what he did, but for what he represents, being worthy of examination, being deserving of analysis, being character worth understanding deeply, being villain worth exploring comprehensively, being William Afton as symbol, as theme, as representation, as meaning, being understood now, being examined completely, being ready for conclusion, for final rest, for ending that brings story full circle, for comprehensive understanding, for complete examination, being ready after rest, being prepared after sleep, being almost finished, being nearly complete, being William Afton's story nearly told, being Purple Guy's examination nearly finished, being ready to conclude soon, after rest, after letting this settle, after sleeping with understanding of William's meaning, of his significance, of his thematic importance, being ready to continue to conclusion after rest. Conclusion, the eternal villain and final rest. As we reach the ending of this comprehensive exploration, as virtually all listeners sleep peacefully, we gather all threads of William Afton's story, understanding his complete journey from engineer and father to child murderer, to corpse in suit to digital consciousness. William being character who spanned 40 years of FNAF timeline, who transformed multiple times, who died and didn't die, who persisted beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond what should be possible. William Afton being man who became monster, being partner who became betrayer, being father who destroyed family, being creator who corrupted creations, being human who became something worse, being person who chose evil, who pursued goals that remained ambiguous, who murdered children for reasons never fully explained, who became Springtrap, who became Scraptrap, who became Glitchtrap, who refused to die, who adapted to circumstances, who persisted across decades, who was burned twice and survived, who was destroyed physically and continued digitally, who was ultimate villain, who was eternal antagonist, who was Purple Guy, who was child murderer, who was William Afton, his story being complete now, being told fully, being examined comprehensively from beginning to end, from man to monster to corpse to consciousness, being understood completely, being explored thoroughly, being ready now for final rest, for conclusion that brings everything together, for understanding that encompasses his entire journey, his complete character, his full significance. The arc complete, from man to digital consciousness. William Afton's journey beginning as engineer, as Henry Emily's partner, as father to 3 children, as person who seemed normal, who hid darkness, who concealed evil, who maintained facade while perhaps planning crimes, perhaps developing obsessions, perhaps becoming what he would become. William starting as man, as person, as human with family and career and life, then descending, transforming, becoming murderer, killing Charlotte Emily, murdering 5 more children, filling animatronics with spirits, creating FNAF's horror, becoming Purple Guy, becoming child murderer, becoming monster while maintaining human form. William's first transformation being psychological rather than physical, being internal rather than external, becoming evil while looking human, then dying in spring lock failure, being crushed by spring Bonnie suit, laughing as he died, becoming Springtrap, becoming corpse in costume, becoming mechanical horror, being sealed for 30 years, persisting through decades, emerging as Springtrap, being burned in fire, surviving as Scraptrap, being trapped by Henry, being burned again, supposedly dying, supposedly being destroyed, but persisting as digital consciousness, becoming Glitchtrap, continuing in new form, adapting to new medium, refusing to die, refusing to stop, refusing to end. William's complete arc being journey from human to monster to corpse to machine to digital entity. being transformations, showing his persistence, showing his adaptability, showing his refusal to accept death, showing his determination to continue, being complete character arc, showing evil evolving, showing villain adapting, showing purple guy persisting across forms, across deaths, across everything. William's story being complete now, being journey from man to something far worse, being examined fully, being understood completely. Source of all FNAF horror. William's crimes created everything. Understanding that William Afton was source of FNAF's horror, that his crimes created everything, that his murders filled animatronics with spirits, that his evil established haunting, that his actions created possessed machines, created supernatural horror, created the nightmare that defines franchise. William being origin point, being source, being cause of everything. Without William's crimes, there would be no possessed animatronics, no haunted machines, no spirits seeking vengeance, no horror at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. William being necessary villain, being essential antagonist, being character whose actions created franchise's premise, whose evil established story's foundation, whose crimes generated all subsequent horror. William being responsible for everything, being guilty of everything, being source of all tragedy, being origin of all horror, understanding this being crucial for comprehending his significance, his importance, his centrality to FNAF. William being not just villain but the villain, not just antagonist but the antagonist, not just murderer but the murderer whose crimes defined everything, whose evil created everything, whose persistence maintained everything. William being examined as source, as origin, as cause, being recognized as character who made FNAF what it is, who created the horror, who established the haunting, who filled the animatronics with spirits, who murdered the children, who destroyed the families, who corrupted the entertainment, who perverted the joy, who created the nightmare, being William Afton as source of all FNAF horror, being Purple Guy as origin of all franchise evil, being child murderer whose crimes created everything fans love about series, whose evil made franchise possible, whose persistence maintained story across games, being examined as source, being understood as origin, being recognized as foundational villain, being William Afton creating everything. Ultimate villain, evil that won't die. William Afton being ultimate villain because he refuses to die, because he persists beyond everything, because he adapts to circumstances, because he continues regardless of attempts to stop him, because he transforms rather than ending, because he survives fires and traps and comprehensive destruction, because he becomes digital when physical form is destroyed, because he is evil that endures, that persists, that won't stop. William being examined as ultimate antagonist, as villain who achieves ultimate persistence, as evil that literally won't die, William dying multiple times and continuing, being killed repeatedly and persisting, being destroyed comprehensively and surviving, being evidence that some evils can't be stopped easily, that some villains require eternal opposition, that some darkness requires constant fighting. William being this, being evil requiring continuous resistance, being villain demanding perpetual vigilance, being darkness necessitating eternal struggle. William being ultimate villain because he makes heroism necessary forever, because he requires continuous opposition, because his persistence means fight never ends, meaning heroes must always remain alert, must always be ready, must always continue opposing him. William being perfect eternal antagonist, being villain appropriate for franchise that continues across many games, being evil suitable for story that persists across years, being purple guy matching FNAF's approach to ongoing narrative, being examined as ultimate villain, being understood as perfect antagonist, being recognized as ideal FNAF enemy, being evil that endures, being darkness that persists, being William Afton as ultimate villain, being complete understanding of his significance, being full recognition of his importance, being comprehensive appreciation of his role as eternal antagonist. Ambiguity about true ending. Can William ever be stopped? Whether William can ever be truly stopped being ambiguous, being uncertain, being question that remains unanswered. William supposedly being destroyed in FNAF 6 fire but continuing as Glitchtrap. Supposedly being eliminated but persisting digitally. Supposedly being ended but adapting to new form. The pattern suggesting that William might never be truly stopped, that he might continue forever, that he might be eternal villain in literal sense, being consciousness that can't be destroyed, being evil that can't be eliminated, being purple guy who will always return, being William Afton who refuses to accept ending, whether he can ever be truly stopped being unknowable, being question without certain answer, being ambiguity that FNAF maintains, being refusal to provide definite conclusion, William potentially being stoppable but not stopped yet, potentially being defeatable but not defeated yet, potentially being endable but not ended yet, or potentially being truly eternal, being literally unstoppable, being evil that will continue forever requiring eternal opposition, being villain who can't be finally defeated only temporarily contained, the ambiguity being appropriate for FNAF, being typical of franchise, being refusal to provide certain closure, being maintenance of mystery, being William Afton's ultimate persistence, being purple guy's eternal return, being child murderer who might never truly die, being examined as final ambiguity, being understood as deliberate uncertainty, being recognized as refusal to provide definite ending, being FNAF, being FNAF, being franchise maintaining ambiguity, being story refusing clear conclusion, being William Afton possibly being eternal, being purple guy potentially being unstoppable, being villain who might continue forever, being examined as final uncertainty, being understood as ultimate ambiguity, being William's story ending ambiguously, appropriately, typically for FNAF, being examined completely now, being understood fully, being ready for final rest, permission to rest completely. And now, with William Afton's complete story told, with Purple Guy's full journey explored, with child murderer's entire timeline examined, with eternal villain's persistence understood, with ultimate antagonist's significance comprehended, you can rest completely, can sleep deeply, can drift into dreams knowing William's story, knowing his crimes, knowing his transformations, knowing his persistence, knowing his significance, knowing everything about him from beginning to end, from man to monster to corpse to consciousness, knowing William Afton completely, knowing Purple Guy fully, knowing FNAF's ultimate villain thoroughly, being able to rest with this complete understanding, to sleep with this comprehensive knowledge, to drift away knowing that William's story is told, that his journey is examined, that his character is understood, that his significance is recognized, that his evil is comprehended, being able to rest completely now, being able to sleep deeply now, being able to drift peacefully now, knowing everything, understanding completely, being finished with examination, being done with exploration, being complete with analysis, being ready to sleep, being ready to rest, being ready to dream, being far from William's evil, being distant from Purple Guy's crimes, being separated from child murderer's horror, being safe in sleep, being protected by understanding, being comforted by knowledge, being able to rest peacefully, knowing William's complete story, knowing his full significance, knowing his entire journey, being complete understanding, being comprehensive knowledge, being thorough examination, being William Afton understood, being Purple Guy explained, being eternal villain comprehended, being ready now to rest completely. Final gratitude and gentle farewell. Thank you for joining this complete exploration of William Afton's story, Purple Guy's journey, child murderer's timeline, eternal villain's persistence, for staying through comprehensive examination, through every crime, through every transformation, through every death and survival, through complete understanding from beginning to end. Thank you for listening, for caring about understanding FNAF's ultimate villain, for wanting to know William's complete story, for being here now as we conclude, as we finish, as we say goodbye to William Afton, to Purple Guy, to Springtrap, to Scraptrap, to Glitchtrap, to Eternal Villain, to Ultimate Antagonist, to Child Murderer, to Father who destroyed family, to Creator who corrupted creations, to Engineer who became monster, to Man who became evil. Thank you for listening, for understanding, for exploring, for being here through complete comprehensive examination of William Afton. Sleep now, completely, finally, deeply, peacefully, far from murders and possessed animatronics, far from springlock failures and burning buildings, far from digital viruses and corrupted followers, far from everything except peace, except rest, except dreams, except understanding that William's story is told, that Purple Guy's journey is complete, that eternal villain is examined thoroughly, that ultimate antagonist is understood completely. Sleep knowing William Afton from beginning to end, knowing his crimes, knowing his transformations, knowing his persistence, knowing his evil, knowing everything about FNAF's ultimate villain, being complete understanding now, being comprehensive knowledge now, being thorough examination finished now, being ready to sleep completely, to rest deeply, to dream peacefully, being done with William Afton, being finished with Purple Guy, being complete with examination, being ready for sleep, for rest, for dreams, for peace, for distance from horror, for separation from evil, for safety in sleep, being protected by fiction, being blessed with distance from William's crimes, being able to rest knowing he's not real, being able to sleep understanding he's fiction, being able to drift peacefully, knowing story is told, villain is understood, examination is complete, being finished now, being done now, being ready to sleep now completely, deeply, peacefully, finally, being William Afton's story complete, being Purple Guy's examination finished, being eternal villain's persistence understood, being ultimate antagonist's significance comprehended, being ready now to rest completely. Sleep deeply, dream peacefully. William's story is told. The villain is understood. You know everything. Good night.